Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel General Hospital today. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The sterile antiseptic scent of General Hospital was a smell Carly had long associated with both crisis and comfort. It was the backdrop to the worst days of her life and the best. The place where loved ones hovered between life and death, and where new life entered the world. Today, she had expected it to be a place of confrontation, certainly, but not of utter annihilation. She had marched through those automatic doors with the familiar fire in her belly, ready to confront the latest lie, to battle the latest enemy threatening her family. She was Carly Corinthos after all. Storms were her natural habitat. The object of her ire was Nina Reeves. The conflict was a well-worn path between them, a trench dug deep with years of betrayal, resentment, and competing claims over the same men, the same power, the same space in Port Charles. The immediate issue was Nina's recent, and in Carly's view profoundly manipulative, attempt to insert herself into the life of Carly's son Wiley. Nina's connection to the boy was a fact Carly had learned to tolerate, a bitter pill forced down her throat by the complex web of biological relation. Wiley was the grandson of Nina's late daughter. But every move Nina made felt like an attempt to pry the child away from his real family, from Michael and his wife, and by extension from Carly herself. Carly's plan was simple. Corner Nina, remind her of her place, and make it unequivocally clear that any future attempts to overstep would be met with the full force of the Corinthos family's wrath. She had rehearsed the lines in her head on the drive over, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She would be cold, precise, and devastatingly effective. It was a role she had perfected over decades. She found Nina not in a patient room, but in one of the quieter waiting areas on the maternity floor, a cruel irony that Carly didn't yet appreciate. Nina was standing by a large window, the afternoon sun casting a long, frail shadow behind her. She looked unusually pensive, her usual armor of defiant elegance seeming slightly dented. This only fueled Carly's suspicion. A vulnerable Nina was often the most dangerous kind. Nina! Carly's voice cut through the quiet hum of the hospital, sharp and uncompromising. We need to talk. Now. Nina turned slowly, and for a fleeting second, Carly saw something in her eyes that wasn't defiance or cunning, but a deep, weary sorrow. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a familiar guardedness. Carly, I'm not really in the mood for one of your lectures. I have things on my mind. I'm sure you do, Carly retorted, stepping closer, closing the distance like a shark moving in for the kill. And topping that list is my grandson. I want you to understand something. Your visits with Wiley are a privilege, not a right. A privilege granted by Michael's goodwill. And my goodwill is running dangerously thin. Your little stunt last week, showing up unannounced and trying to take him to the park alone? That ends. Now. Nina's jaw tightened. He is my grandson too. Or have you forgotten the part where my daughter gave birth to him? I have a right to a relationship with him. You have a right to nothing. Carly's voice rose, echoing in the sterile corridor. A nurse glanced their way before quickly looking down and hurrying past. You forfeited any claim to family when you spent years lying in a coma, while your own children thought you were dead. You don't get to waltz back in and play Grandma of the Year. Especially not when your every move is calculated to cause maximum damage to my family. The barb about the coma hit its mark as Carly knew it would. Nina's face paled. But instead of firing back with her usual venom, she looked at Carly with an expression that was almost pitying. It was the most infuriating response possible. You always do this, Carly, Nina said, her voice low and strangely calm. You build these fortresses around what you think is yours, and you attack anyone who comes near. You think it makes you strong. But it just makes you blind. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me, Carly scoffed. This isn't about my fortresses. This is about your relentless campaign to hurt me and mine. It's been your hobby for years. Well, I'm drawing a line in the sand. You will stick to the scheduled visits, you will not interfere with his upbringing, and you will stay out of my family's business. A bitter smile touched Nina's lips. Your family's business. That's rich. You're so quick to define what family is, to decide who belongs and who doesn't. You sit in judgment of everyone, holding them to a standard you yourself could never hope to meet. What is that supposed to mean? Carly snapped, though a cold, unfamiliar trickle of unease started in her stomach. Nina's demeanor was wrong. This wasn't the script. It means you're a hypocrite, Carly. The biggest one in Port Charles. Nina took a step forward, her eyes locking with Carly's. The sorrow was back, but now it was mixed with a terrifying resolve. You stand there and lecture me about my failures as a mother, about my lies. You who have built your entire life on a foundation of secrets and deception. Carly laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Oh please. If you're going to trot out my greatest hits, save your breath. Sonny Jason, the lies I told to protect my children. I own my past, Nina. Every messy, complicated part of it. It's made me who I am. It doesn't change the fact that you are a toxic presence in my son's and my grandson's lives. You own it. Nina whispered, her voice dropping so low that Carly had to lean in slightly to hear her. The move felt like stepping into a trap. Do you, Carly? Do you own all of it? What about the lies you told before you were even Carly? What about the very first lie, the one that created you? The world seemed to slow down. The distant beep of monitors faded into a dull hum. The trickle of unease in Carly's gut became a flood of icy dread. She felt the color drain from her face. No, it wasn't possible. That secret was buried so deep, guarded by so few, that it was practically geological. It was the bedrock of her identity. The one thing that had never ever been shaken. I don't know what you're talking about, Carly said, but her voice lacked its earlier force. It was a weak, transparent denial. Don't you? Nina's eyes were gleaming now, not with triumph, but with a desperate, painful fury. You threatened my family, Carly. You drew your line in the sand. Well, now I'm drawing mine. You want to talk about toxic? You want to talk about who has the right to be in Wiley's life? Let's talk about who has the right to be in anyone's life. Let's talk about who you really are. Carly's heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic, caged bird. Shut up, Nina. No. I'm done shutting up. For years I've known something about you. Something that would destroy the perfect image you've so carefully constructed. I kept it to myself because even I understood the magnitude of it. But you leave me no choice. You've pushed, and now you get to face the truth. Whatever poison you're about to spew, it's a lie, Carly hissed, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. She felt dizzy, the hallway beginning to tilt. It's another one of your vicious lies. Is it? Nina reached into her purse. She didn't pull out a weapon, but what she held was infinitely more dangerous. It was a small, worn-looking flash drive. Do you know what this is? This is the end of your world, Carly. This is the truth about the intruder. The name spoken aloud after so many years was like a physical blow. Carly staggered back a step, her bravado completely shattered. The intruder. The night of the fire. The story she had told 1,000 times, the foundational trauma of her youth that explained everything. Her toughness, her fear of abandonment, her fierce, sometimes pathological protectiveness of her family. It was the story of a young girl named Caroline Benson, who woke to an intruder in her home, a man who killed her mother before her eyes, leaving her an orphan. It was the story that had earned her pity, understanding, and had in many ways defined her to everyone who knew her, especially to the men who loved her. Sonny, Jason, even Jax. It was a lie she had built her entire life upon. How? Carly's voice was a strangled croak. How did you get that? It doesn't matter how I got it, Nina said, her own pain evident in every word. What matters is what's on it. It's a confession, Carly. A deathbed confession from someone who was there that night. It details everything. There was no intruder. Stop it, Carly begged, but the fight was gone from her. She was pleading now. There was only a terrified teenage girl, Nina continued, her voice relentless, merciless. A girl who was arguing with her mother. A girl who was high on drugs she'd stolen. A girl who, in a fit of rage and confusion, knocked over a candle. She started the fire. She killed her own mother. No. The word was torn from Carly's throat, a raw scream of denial. Tears were already streaming down her face, hot and shameful. It was the intruder. There was an intruder. The only intruder was the lie you told to the police, to the social workers, to everyone, Nina said, her words landing like punches. You couldn't face what you had done, so you created a monster. You created the intruder to escape the guilt. And you've been living as that victim ever since. The poor tragic orphan. It's the cornerstone of the Carly Corinthos myth. But it was never true. You are not the victim of that night, Carly. You are the perpetrator. The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. Carly felt the walls closing in. Every memory, every moment of her life, was being violently rewritten. The foundational trauma wasn't a trauma inflicted upon her. It was a crime she had committed. The grief that had shaped her was not just grief, but a bottomless well of guilt she had refused to acknowledge. The strength she prided herself on was not resilience, but a desperate, decades-long act of avoidance. Her mind became a chaotic montage of images. Her mother's face, not as a victim to be mourned, but as a woman she had argued with, a woman she had killed. The fire, not a terrifying attack from an outside force, but a conflagration of her own making. The years of using that story to secure sympathy, to manipulate situations, to explain her own flaws. It was all a grotesque fraud. She saw Sonny's face, the way he had held her when she woke from nightmares about the intruder. She saw Jax's compassion when she told him the story. She saw Jason's silent, protective fury on her behalf. Their love, their loyalty had been given to a fiction. They had loved a woman whose very identity was predicated on a monstrous falsehood. And what of her children? Michael, Morgan, Jocelyn. They had grown up with the story of their grandmother's murder. It was a part of their family history. What would they think when they learned their mother was the one responsible? That their entire understanding of their own lineage was a lie? The horror of it was absolute, all-consuming. You, Carly gasped, struggling to breathe. You can't, you wouldn't. I would, Nina said, her own tears now falling. You left me no choice. You threatened to take Wiley from me. You questioned my right to be a grandmother. Well, now I'm questioning yours. What kind of grandmother lies about the very nature of her own mother's death? What kind of mother builds a life on such a devastating deception? You judged me unworthy, Carly. But who are you? Really? Nina held out the flash drive. It's all on here. The full confession. Witness statements that were buried. Evidence that was overlooked because everyone felt so sorry for the poor, traumatized girl. The girl who was you. Carly stared at the small plastic object as if it were a venomous snake. That tiny thing held the power to unravel everything. Her marriage to Sonny. Her relationships with her children. Her standing in the community. Her sense of self. It would all be obliterated. The tears were coming in torrents now, uncontrollable sobs that racked her entire body. This wasn't the calculated crying she sometimes used to get her way. This was a visceral, primal reaction to the total destruction of her reality. The horror was not just in the truth itself, but in the sheer scale of the lie she had lived. For over 30 years she had been carrying this secret, not even allowing herself to consciously remember it, building a fortress of a life on top of it. And now, Nina had detonated the explosives at the foundation. She fell to her knees, the cool linoleum floor a stark contrast to the burning shame on her face. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking back and forth, trying to contain the seismic pain that was tearing her apart. The sounds she made were barely human, guttural moans of agony and loss. She was mourning her mother all over again, but this time with the added unbearable weight of being her murderer. She was mourning the loss of the person she thought she was. Carly Corinthos, the survivor, was dead. In her place was Caroline Benson, the girl who had killed her mother and spent a lifetime lying about it. Nina looked down at her, and for a moment, a flicker of regret crossed her face. She had wanted to hurt Carly, to stop her, to protect her own fragile connection to Wiley. But she had not fully anticipated the absolute devastation she would witness. This was more than a victory. It was an annihilation. I'm sorry it came to this, Carly, Nina said softly, her voice trembling. But you brought it on yourself. She placed the flash drive on a nearby chair, a silent, damning indictment. Then without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving Carly alone in a pool of her own shattered existence. Carly remained on the floor, lost in the abyss of the truth. The world outside the window continued. Cars moved, people lived their lives, oblivious to the cataclysm that had just occurred within these walls. But for Carly, time had stopped. Every happy memory was now tainted. Every moment of pride was now a source of shame. The love of her family felt like a prize she had stolen under false pretenses. How could she ever face Sonny? How could she look into his eyes and tell him that the core tragedy he had spent years helping her overcome was a fabrication? How could she tell Michael that the story of his grandmother's heroic death was a fairy tale designed to hide his mother's unforgivable sin? The weight of the deception was crushing. It was a physical pressure on her chest, making it impossible to breathe. She saw her entire life as a grotesque performance, and she was the lead actor in a play she hadn't even known she was starring in. The intruder had been real after all. He had just been living inside her head for 3 decades, a ghost of her own creation, and now he had finally been let out, and he was destroying everything in his path. The tears kept coming, a seemingly endless flood of horror and regret. This was the truth she had spent a lifetime running from, and now it had caught up with her. There was no fortress strong enough, no lie big enough to protect her from it anymore. Carly Corinthos, the woman who had faced down mobsters, business rivals, and every manner of threat, had finally been defeated by the one thing she could never escape, herself. And as she knelt on the cold hospital floor, the echoes of her sobs the only sound in her private hell, she knew that the life she had known was over. The terrible truth had set her free, only to immediately imprison her in a cage of her own making, from which there would be no escape. The silence that followed was deafening. Sonny's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with something she couldn't read. For the first time, Carly realized that no matter what answers she received, nothing would ever erase the horror she had felt when she first discovered the truth. The tears that spilled down her face were more than grief now. They were the acknowledgement that her world had already changed forever. She rose unsteadily to her feet, clutching the folder against her chest. I can't keep crying over this, Sonny. I need the truth. All of it. And if you won't give it to me, I'll find it myself. Her voice trembled but carried a steel edge that hadn't been there before. As she turned to leave, her tears still fell, hot and unrelenting. They were the tears of a woman both broken and unbreakable, devastated yet determined. The horror of the truth had brought her to her knees, but it had also lit a fire inside her that nothing, not lies, not betrayal, not fear, could extinguish. Carly walked out of the office, her vision blurred by tears, her body trembling with grief, but her heart resolved. The terrible truth had nearly destroyed her, but now it would become the fuel that drove her forward. No matter how much it hurt, no matter how many more tears she would shed, Carly knew one thing for certain. She would uncover every last piece of the story, and she would not stop until the people responsible paid the price.